In this video, I'm going to show you how to animate this Octopus character walk cycle using the RubberHose 3 plugin for After Effects. The only requirement for this video is the plugin itself and a basic understanding of it, and I have a discount link in the description if you want to pick it up. So let's jump in. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new composition by clicking this button down here. Let's call this Octopus. I'll set it to 1080 by 1080 pixels and maybe set the duration to 10 seconds. Now we actually want to change this from seconds to frames, so I'm going to hold Control and click the time code here, and that's going to change things to frames. And I've got some artwork here of an octopus head that I made in Illustrator, and I'll put a link in the description so you can download this. Now I have the RubberHose panel on the right here. If you don't know how to open the plugin, you can just go to Window, Extensions, RubberHose, and then you can dock it anywhere in your interface that you want it. And there are a number of tabs here. I'm going to choose the Build tab, and I'm going to click New RubberHose. And I'll name this Leg 1, and I'll make sure that it's set to Hip Ankle, which is just what the two controllers will be named, and because we're making legs, it makes most sense. And here we have a leg. And you can see we can move these controllers around and the leg is going to move. So before we go any further, I'm just going to move some things into position. So I think the head's going to go around here, and I'm going to create a floor so we know where to put the feet. So I'm going to select the pen tool and I'm just going to click and then shift click, and we have ourselves a little floor. I'm going to set the stroke to 2 pixels and make it black. And I'm going to align it center. Now I'm going to press V to come back to our selection tool and just drag the foot down so it's in line with the ground. And let's drag the other leg up so it's sort of poking out from behind the eye. Now you can see the leg is kind of extended and isn't bending. So we can change this by selecting our ankle and increasing the hose length up here. And you can see eventually you'll start to see a knee. So I'm going to choose a hose length of around 600. Now what we can do is parent the hip joint to the head. So if I do that using this parent pick whip, I can now move the head and you can see the whole leg moves in a kind of inverse kinematics way. Now this leg doesn't look much like a tentacle, so let's come to the Style tab and we can try out some different styles here, but I know the one that looks the best for a tentacle is Wavy Gravy. So I'm going to double click that with my hose selected. And you can see it's going to add 2 bend effects here. So this is effectively like adding 2 knees at different points on the hose. But it also adds this bend wave effect, which is just going to make the limb slowly undulate in a kind of wavy motion without us even animating it. So if I press play now, you can see it's moving like that. And that's just going to give some character to the limb as it moves. Maybe let's increase the hose length a bit more now to try and get more bend. And you can see we have a very noodling-like limb. Now, tentacles tend to get more narrow towards the end, so what we can do is we can keep our leg selected and double-click this taper style. And it's going to add this taper effect to our limb, allowing us to control the start size and end size. Let's also move this limb behind our head, and color it the same as the rest of our body by selecting the stroke, eyedropper, and then just pick that color. Let's set the start size to maybe about 60 and the end size to about 20. I'm just going to shorten our number of frames here to about 150. So I'm going to put my playhead on 150. I'm going to press N and then I'm going to right click, trim comp to work area. And now our whole timeline is just 150 frames. So let's animate one of these legs. I'm going to select the ankle, I'm going to press P to bring up its position keyframes, and it's automatically separated our position into X and Y. I'm going to right click that and change it back. I'm going to deselect separate dimensions just so it's a little bit easier to work with for what we need. I'm going to just drag the ankle down a little bit. I'm going to bring it back a bit and put a position keyframe here. Then I'm going to go to 20 frames and I'm going to bring it up like it's taking a step forward, and then I'm going to come to 40 frames and I'm going to bring it down, and then I come to 60 frames and I'm going to just copy and paste the first frame, and then we have this motion where it goes up and down again and then back. And if we just press N here, we can just loop this section. So press play now, and we can see this little loop. Now you can see it's not actually looping very well, and the reason is that although the position of the ankle is looping, this bend wave effect that we have isn't looping. So what we need to do here is find a number on this speed value that will make it loop. So I'm going to memorize what this limb looks like right here, and then I'm going to press Shift End to come to our last frame, and I'm going to change the speed until I think it looks like our first frame. Somewhere around this, I would say. And then let's compare. Shift Home, Shift End. Ooh, we're very slightly off, probably by half a point. So let's try 31.5. Now it looks pretty much identical. So now let's press play. Looking much better. So I'm going to highlight these frames and add some easing to them. So I'm going to highlight them, press F9, and then let's watch. So I like the easing, but I don't think it should ease at the top of the arc, only as it lifts off and begins to move backwards. So I'm going to highlight the center keyframes and press Ctrl and click them to remove that easing. So we just have easing on these outer ones. Now I'm going to highlight the keyframe when the limb is up in the air. I'm going to come up to the pen tool and select this Convert Vertex tool. And if we just move the playhead a little bit, this will allow us to have more of a arc instead of just a point. So let's see how this looks now. Looking very tentacle-like. Just to clarify, I know this is not how octopuses or octopi actually walk, but we're just making a cute, quirky character here. So all the biologists out there, please forgive me. So now we have one limb moving correctly. We can start to duplicate this limb until we have 8 limbs. So I'll select one of these limbs and click the Manage tab and click Duplicate. And let's call this one Leg 2. And then it's going to create our limb. Let's drag all these layers above and we're going to offset them by 10 frames. Now, for the first 10 frames of our animation, we won't see this limb, but instead we're just going to press B 10 frames in to set the start position of our animation to the 10th frame. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, but now it's not looping correctly. If I press Shift Home, Shift End, it looks different. What we have to do is bring our end position forward by 10 frames. Now if we look, it's not quite matching. And the reason is, one thing I forgot to do, if we open up our ankle keyframes for leg 1, we need these keyframes to loop once they're finished. We need them to just keep going and going and going and going. To do that, we need to hold Alt and click our stopwatch here. And we need to type into this box, loop out, and then click off. And then we'll do that as well for leg 2. Now if we compare, Shift Home, Shift End, they look pretty much exactly the same. And if we play, they loop perfectly. So I'll do one more with you and then I'll speed up the rest. So I've duplicated the limb, I'm moving it forward by 10 frames. I'm setting the beginning point and the end point forward by 10 frames. And actually, an easier way to do that is just to hover over the work area here and just drag it forward. That will move the beginning and the end point forward by 10 frames. And now let's press play. And we have 3 limbs moving now. I'll do the rest of the limbs now and speed it up. Okay, so I've copied all the limbs, so we now have 8 limbs, and let's play and see what it looks like. It works and it loops, but we need to add some more variation, to add some more character to these limbs. The way I'm going to do that initially is to change the offset in our wave effect for each limb. Now offset allows us to offset the wave so it's at a different point in its wave cycle. We have 8 limbs and offset can go between 0 and 100. So we're going to do 100 divided by 8 and press enter, and that's going to give us 12.5. So we're going to change each limb in multiples of 12.5. Leg 2 is going to be 12.5 times 2. Leg 3, 12.5 times 3, and so on. Now let's have a look what it looks like. It's looking better, but it's still looking a bit too perfect. So why don't we change the animation for some of these legs to add more variation? Let's come to, I don't know, leg 2. And let's say its starting position is going to be a bit further back. And then let's copy and paste that starting position and paste it to the ending as well. Let's do the same with, we'll skip 1 and then we'll come to leg 4. And let's choose a position maybe even further back. Maybe even further back for this one. Let's go to there, let's copy and paste so the beginning end match. Let's change another one. So I want this one to come forward a lot further. So I'm just pressing shift and right arrow to bring that position forward. Let's have a look. Yeah, I want another one of them to come forward more. Let's come back to leg 2 again. And let's change this so it comes forward more. Let's come to leg 5. Maybe this one comes a lot further forward. And then we have something like this. Now, when something's walking, a lot of the time the head kind of bobs up and down. So we're going to animate the head here. We're going to add a position keyframe at the beginning of our animation, which is frame 70. And then we're going to come to halfway, which is frame 100. And we're going to lower down the Y position. Then we're going to just copy and paste the start keyframe to the end. And let's play that, see what it looks like. Let's add some easing. I think we want it to be a bit faster, so I'm going to highlight all the keyframes, hold Alt and drag the furthest keyframe back to make it a bit faster. Now, instead of adding more keyframes at the end, we're just going to add another loop out expression. So we'll hold Alt, click the position stopwatch and add loop out. Now, we also want the head to kind of rotate a bit as it walks. So we're going to come to the rotation property, add a keyframe at the beginning, and we're going to press U to bring up the position keyframes so we can time it the same. And let's add another rotation keyframe here at frame 85 and just change the rotation slightly. Then let's come to the final keyframe, copy and paste the start keyframe, but we also kind of want the head to bounce a little bit. We want it to overshoot. So we're going to overshoot it there. And then again, we'll copy and paste the start. Let's highlight these keyframes and add some easing. And we also need to add a loop out expression to this as well. I think that looks quite good. Now, in order to add a bit of depth and make the legs look distinct from each other, we're going to change the color slightly of each of the legs. The frontmost leg is going to be the same color as the head, but then the legs further back are going to become increasingly more white so that they blend in with the background. So let's come to leg 7 and we're going to decrease the saturation by 10 to 80 and press OK. Leg 6 is going to be 70. Leg 5 will be 60. Leg 4 will be 50. And so on. And let's see how that looks. And you can see that adds a lot more depth and makes the legs more distinct from each other. I've just noticed at this point in the animation, the legs are all kind of clumped together, so I'm just going to move this keyframe forward. And this is where you can think for yourself a bit and kind of tweak the leg keyframes to your liking. Add as much variation as you want. Now, our octopus looks like it's moving, but to really emphasize that it's moving, we're going to add a little background that's going to move as the octopus walks. So we're going to come over to the top and grab the pen tool, and And we're going to draw like a seabed, and let's make it the same size as our line here. Just add a few little bumps, and you can design this bit however you want. And just complete the shape like that. And let's name this layer floor. I'm just going to bring those bottom points up in line with our floor here. And I've noticed it's got a stroke, so I'm just going to remove that. Next, we're going to duplicate this shape that we created by clicking it and pressing Ctrl D, and then twirl down its transform, and move the position so it sits alongside the first shape. Next, we're going to come to the start of our animation, and we're going to add a position keyframe for the floor. Let's come to the end of our animation, and we're going to move it to the left so that it lines up exactly with that line that we drew previously. Now if we press Shift Home and Shift End, we can see that it lines up pretty much exactly, but we do have this section of seabed that's hanging off to the left and looks a bit weird. So to fix that, we're going to create a rectangle and position it like this. Let's align it to center, and let's add a linear gradient to it by coming up to this fill button, press linear gradient, then come into the gradient editor. So along the bottom, both color stops should be black, and we're going to add some opacity stops at the top. On the edges, we want it to be 0 opacity, and then we're going to add some extra opacity stops along the top, where we're going to turn the opacity up to 100. And then tweak the position of these handles. Press OK. And now we're going to twirl down this gradient, and we're going to tweak the start and end points so that we get a nice smooth gradient on either side. And we're going to use this as an alpha matte for our seabed so that you don't see that seabed trailing off on the left. So drag the track matte pick whip on the floor layer and drag it onto our gradient layer. Now let's turn that line we created for the floor off. And if we play this, it now loops seamlessly. And there is our Octopus Walk Cycle. I hope you found this video useful, and congrats if you reached the end of it. I'll be posting more RubberHose 3 tutorials soon, so if you found this video useful, make sure to like the video, subscribe and enable those notifications so you never miss a tutorial like this. See you in the next one.